So let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to be interviewing Dr. Tom Deans, the New York Times top 10 author of Willing Wisdom, which remains the best-selling Canadian estate planning book of all time. Dr. Deans has delivered more than 1,000 keynote speeches in 26 countries, and we'll be talking about the importance of estate planning in light of our current global crisis. If you've seen Dr. Deans on CBC or BNN, you'll know that he delivers a fast-paced, entertaining, and informative message that you won't want to miss. So what are some of the takeaways from today? Understanding the basics of estate planning for business owners, understanding the importance of family meetings, understanding that estate planning is also about aging and long-term care, gain confidence to begin importance of family conversations about the transition of business wealth. My name is Dan Loletta. I have been working with small businesses and the transfer of businesses for about 4 decades. I believe I started in 1985. With us is also Kevin Prater, and I'll let Kevin introduce himself.
Hi, I'm the other half of the Dan and Kevin show here. I also have been doing business transition planning for privately held businesses and family businesses probably for the last 15, 16 years or so. But we're excited to have Tom with us today. And, our format here is a good conversation because I think that ties right in with the essence of your book in terms of, really gaining those confidence to have those important family conversations. So we're excited to have you here today, Tom. And we look at the title of today's webinar, at least here in the U.S. with the change of the election and all that stuff, lots of potential changes to the estate planning laws here in the U.S. So the subject matter actually starts to become more urgent as people are really trying to figure out what they should do. From your position, what is your overview of the state of estate planning here in the United States from your perspective, Tom?
Well, before I answer, Kevin and Dan, thank you for having me. This is it's a fascinating time to be looking at estate planning. It is a different day. There is much more urgency. You just referenced the elections. Obviously, there's going to be some big tax consequences. We have federal and state governments running huge deficits. They're going to have to find a way to raise taxes. So how are they going to do that? Well, they're going to start. Estate planning is not number 10 on government's wish list. It's like right up there, 1, 2, 3. It's coming like a freight train. So that alone should bring the urgency to this subject. If you're a business owner, you've probably done what my family did, my grandfather and great-grandfather did. When we made money, we put it back into the business, right? It seems logical. It seems smart because we know that business. It's producing good revenue, good growth. We understand the risks, or we think we do. But of course, what we end up doing is forgetting that at some point, that equity in that business has to transition somewhere. And that's estate planning. And I just think a lot of business owners just don't view their business as part of their estate plan. They view it as business succession planning, but really, it really is, if a business owner is going to live a long time and own those voting shares, control those voting shares, that they have to go somewhere. Money is constantly moving. And so to answer your question, what is the state of affairs of estate planning in America today? I would have to say it's actually in pretty awful shape. And I don't want to be a downer Debbie here, but listen, 125 million American adults are missing a will, including half of all business owners in Cleveland and in your state. Business owners right across the country are missing the most important document in an estate plan. So if a business owner does not have a will, their business will get chopped up along with their barbecue and their canoe, according to the state formula for intestacy. And I can tell you right now that most business owners would not be happy with that formula. That a business owner has had many conversations with maybe their surviving spouse of what they would like to happen to their business. or their boat or their vacation home or their investment portfolios, those conversations and $2 will get you a cup of coffee. If you don't have a will, those conversations are meaningless. You need a document. You need this is the starting point. We are not talking about advanced estate planning. We are talking about the most fundamental basics that are missing in most business owners' estate plans. And so the 50% of business owners who do have wills and financial power of attorneys and healthcare directives, 80% of those documents are badly outdated. Like badly outdated. Like outdated how? Like their executor who they appointed, who is probably older than them, has already died, has already predeceased them. And so like rendering those wills almost useless, or actually in some cases worse than having a will. So I just really want to cover off on both those two demographics. The business owner who doesn't have a will, bring some urgency to their affairs so that they get one. If there's only one call to action today, and that is that they're going to be in touch with you, they're going to get some assistance on who is a good estate planning attorney in your neighborhood, how you can help them, or two, if these business owners who are listening do have a will, really bringing some urgency to reviewing those documents and making sure that they're still relevant, that you're still actually up to date. So that's the quick answer. Pretty poor shape, but if I do a good job today, I'm going to create some, not just some urgency, but actually some enthusiasm around this subject. This is a subject that we've allowed business owners to think is mundane, boring, sad, dark, morose. Like, you know, estate planning equals things that you do with your attorney that it's just a cost, right? If I do my job well today, I'm going to say, no. What you don't understand is that estate planning is actually where the smartest, most successful and dynastic families make their money and protect their wealth and ultimately transition their wealth so that the next generation goes off and does interesting things. I mean, you're sitting in the city that is ground zero, Cleveland, for one of the most successful, and I would say pioneers of dynastic wealth based on the model that I've experienced and write about, which is the heavily reliant on family meetings. The Rockefellers were leading in that area. And to this day, Rockefellers are having family meetings and using them to prepare the next generation to receive wealth, understand what it is, understand what it's not, and then to go off and do really interesting, productive things with that inherited wealth. So, so that is the quick answer.
So
go ahead.
As we talk about the things that you have just brought up about business owners not having documents and that issue, other than just I have a lot on my plate, what do you think is stopping our current business owners from developing and having these documents reviewed on a regular basis?
Well, Dan, I'll bet you wished that you've been in this business for 4 decades. I'll bet you wish you had $1 for every time a business owner, you know, when you've raised the subject, a business owner will often say, well, actually, Dan, yeah, no, that's a really good idea. I really should get a will. But you know what? I'm launching a new product next quarter, or I'm starting a new division, or I'm going to incorporate another company. In other words, I don't really want to write a will right now because something is coming down the pipeline that's going to change. And then I just have to go and my will will be outdated. So I have to go and change it. So I'm just going to wait for that to happen. Well, the reality is, if they're waiting for the perfect day to write the perfect will, it will be perfect for exactly 1 day. The reality is estate planning and writing wills, it's not an event. It's a process. It's a lifetime commitment to answering the question, how will my wealth be protected in transition? It doesn't happen on its own. Right. I'll bet you there is an estate planning attorney who is listening in today who has drafted like a fantastic will, a fantastic estate plan for a business owner client, and the document remains unsigned. I would say procrastination is number 1. Superstition is also right at the top of the list. I'm not kidding. Business owners who think, if I go to an attorney, talk about a will, sign a will, hold a will, read a will, keep it at home, I'm begging for trouble. I am asking for trouble. I'm going to expedite my death. I mean, can you imagine me hopping on doing these public lectures, going on, BNN, all these business shows, and saying business owners who write a will actually live longer. Can you hear how absurd that sounds? Well, tell me how the reverse is true. It's complete nonsense. The reality is there is a mechanism for altering wills. It's inexpensive. It's called a codicil. It's inexpensive and it's fast. So all my call to action is today is get a will done. Don't make perfection the enemy of the good. Get a will in place and then work with your advisors on an annual basis to assess what major has changed. Has there been a death of a beneficiary, a birth of a new beneficiary, sale of a business, incorporation of a new business? Did you inherit money that changes your estate? Big life changes, and great advisors, I know you've been at this a long time, you're going to walk those clients through those big life events. And if there has been a big life event, that's going to trigger the review of the will and the updating of the will. Simple, straightforward, and inexpensive.
We see so much of the work that gets done is, or at least I'll say the good work, is to create a framework. And I think you touched on it. It is not a once and done thing. It's a process. And so I know in the planning process, regular reviews of these documents and really using those family meetings that could be set up, even if it's a smaller business that has 1 or 2 family members, just calling it a family meeting and dedicating time to have these very important discussions. I work with somebody that's pretty influential in my professional life, and she uses the terms cracks the conversation. So cracking that conversation is super important from what we're really talking about. But that whole process, you in your book, Willing Wisdom, which I will, later on I want to talk to you about the titles for the chapters. I think really sets this in place, because that process ultimately has to lead to later life care, i.e., what is that business owner as they age? What do they want the outcome to be when they no longer can really help themselves and they're dependent upon their family or others? Maybe touch upon what your thoughts are there and maybe what your family has done to prepare for that.
Yeah, it's a really great question, and I think it's what really makes the book different, and these conversations that we're having different. Look, 125 million people missing a will. What's going on? Do you know that today in the U.S., $2.5 billion will be inherited? That's billion with a B. It's a massive, staggering tsunami of money that is moving from one generation to the next, and half of that money is moving completely chaotically, right? Chaotically. People arriving at funeral homes, their business owner, husband or wife has died, and it's crazy. People can't find documents, they can't find wills. Now they're having to apply to state courts to have a public trustee appointed in order to administer the estate. What could have taken minutes to have a smooth transition turns into this long, expensive, emotional, chaotic transition because someone didn't take the time to spend a little time and a little bit of money to prepare their family. I can tell you in our family, I'm 59 years old. So for 54 years, I've been attending our family meetings. I grew up in these things. I thought everyone did this. Our advisors are always present. My advisor is my parents' advisor, was the same firm advised my grandparents' money and is now actually investing our kids' money, 28 and 26 years old, 4 generations under administration. Do you know when an advisor, I'm preaching to the converted, you know what I'm going to say. When an advisor has that big 100-year view of where wealth came from because they've unlocked those family stories. They know how that business was started. They know the ups and the downs, and they know how hard that previous generation worked to accumulate surplus capital. And then all of the planning resources and tools that are available for you to practice your best work, because it's not just one client, one and done, right? Client gets old, client dies, and you don't know the next generation. The money kind of just disappears and someone starts over again. I mean, in the family meetings with advisors like yourself present, I know you do this, you can see the advantages that accrue to the family, that bring their family together to talk about the most inevitable thing in life, which is aging and dying. And what, of course, and you alluded to in the question, what happens is quickly the family starts to move away from money issues and starts to get into those questions of, okay, you know, mom and dad, when will you leave the operations of the business? When will you physically leave the building and retire? When you do retire, where do you think you will live? Are your intentions to live independently as long as possible? Are you going to move to an assisted facility? Is your plan to move in with one of us? Like, there's lots of ideas that people carry around in their head, but hope is not a plan. A plan is verbalized and discussed, and it's granular and it's repetitive. And when families get into those conversations of where mom and dad will ultimately spend the last part of retirement. Remember, retirement is always presented as someone playing golf, someone fishing, right? It's the glory golden years of just perfect health, and you have surplus capital. So you have money and time, and you're golfing and fishing. But then we forget to talk about that last little chunk of retirement where we're, quite frankly, not swinging anything, are we? Right? We are lying down and we are in the care of someone. Who is that? Who is it that's providing the oversight of our care when we can no longer move, when we've lost mobility, or if we've lost cognitive functions? Who is that? You think that's our bookkeeper or our accountant?
You know, those are real hit 'em hard questions, because oftentimes, like, my mother only had sons, and you know, traditionally it takes a very special son to do the physical daily care of a mother, and and that's not what she wishes to have happen at all. And so, but preparing for who is going to be those caregivers, whether they're hired nurses or other skilled healthcare professionals. Yeah, that's a real issue. And I know for a fact, it doesn't matter how much money you have, you may not be able to find or hire the right person if you don't get ahead of that question and start making those plans.
Wow,
That's what we see.
it's a super observation. And I would just, again, share a little personal story. My last surviving grandmother died in 2011. We spent $150,000 a year for over 10 years, $1.5 million of after-tax dollars, providing really high quality in-home care. That's closer to 200,000 now for really high quality care. Now, remember, my grandmother's 99 at this point when she finally passes, but I watched my parents in their 70s providing care for my grandmother in her 90s.
Right.
Like, we are living longer. And, unless we're having these family conversations about late in life care, which, by the way, are the same conversations about where our estate is going to go. Where do we leave our estate? Where do we leave our cash, our cars, our art? Where do we leave it? Do we leave it to random strangers? No, we almost invariably leave it to family. Now, compare that and contrast that to the business owning family, where he keeps or she keeps all of their wealth secret. No conversations. I know I'm 68 years old, but I'm going to keep everyone in the dark about what I have and where it is and who's going to get what and under what conditions it's going to transition. And I'm not going to transition any of my money now to the next generation, even though I know that I have ample surplus capital to fund my long-term care. I'm going to keep everyone guessing. Now, you tell me how the secrecy and the lack of transparency, the lack of communication, the lack of preparation is going to serve that business owner and their families. How is it that generation that is going to inherit will be served by that wealth? I mean, in many cases, that wealth will destroy both the recipient and the person making those wealth transitions. And we can do better. There's a lot of fear that is preventing business owners from broaching this subject, just starting. The notion of a family meeting is terrifying for many, many business owners. I'm not making light of this, and I'm not trivializing this. This, for many business owners, is really counterintuitive and awkward and difficult. And so all I'm going to say, and I'm going to speak the language of an entrepreneur, because I am one, as was my father and great-grandfather and grandfather and great. 4 generations, that's all we've done. Business owners know intuitively that they make money by taking risks. And here's the rub. I'm imploring business owners who are listening today to take one more calculated risk. And that is to do something that feels counterintuitive, and that is to have a family meeting. It feels dangerous, it feels risky. We know that where there's risk, there's a potential for extraordinary returns, extraordinary opportunities. And I just think, boy, when it comes to succession planning, exit planning, and estate planning, going it alone, trying to solve this problem, who's going to get my wealth, all on my own by sitting in their study or in their office, trying to write a will by themselves, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Business owners need help in this subject, like no other area of their business. They need help. We know this. I'll go back to that number that I started with. 125 million Americans without a will. Now think of this. Studies have shown that Republicans versus Democrats, the intestacy rate, the lack of willingness to write a will, it's equal between Republicans and Democrats. Democrats, I can kind of understand handing their entire life's work over to the state to decide how they're going to divide our life's work. But Republican business owners who have bristled at the idea of the state controlling their assets, they are equally inclined to die intestate and have a state answer the question, who gets my stuff? It is bizarre. It is bizarre.
Yeah.
Well, and Tom, I think what we need to try to relate to entrepreneurs and business owners is this is nothing more than part of their business plan. We sit down and they'll elaborate on their marketing plans, their balance sheets, their P&L statements. They have all this data in front of them that's swimming around, and there's no way to connect it. Now, a lot of times I'll look at them as they're regurgitating all this data and say, well, what are you going to do when you grow up? What's next?
Right.
Yeah.
And then without relating that to the family, there's no way to have that happen. Dying in a business without any proper planning is as bad as not having a marketing plan.
Yeah, I think you're right, Dan. In fact, not only that, but a lot of business owners carry around the idea that, of course, their business is their greatest work of art. It is their legacy. It's the thing that they will be remembered for generations to come. Well, the reality is when a business owner dies at their desk, not metaphorically, I mean literally, dies at the office, because that's where they spend most of their time anyway. So statistically, when they're dying at their desk in their office without a will, without a shareholder agreement, without proper liquidity to help the family pay the huge tax liabilities that are triggered on their death. Listen, you know how that business owner is remembered? They're remembered as a schmuck. They're remembered as someone who is completely indifferent to the feelings of their family, to the conditions that they leave their family, the mess that they have to clean up. And I'm not being delicate with my language here. That is how they're remembered. They're remembered, sure, they were good providers for their family, but then people quickly go to what was wrong with them? Why wouldn't they spend $500 or $1,000 or $2,000 on a really good, even if it's a basic will or a good financial power of attorney to make sure that when life unfolds, and it will, that the family is empowered with the appropriate documentation to serve their mother or father when they need them.
Right.
This is why 125 million people don't have wills. They think that estate planning is just about other people getting their stuff. No, listen very carefully, business owners. Estate planning is very much about the living. If you don't have a will, I guarantee you do not have a financial power of attorney. I don't know anyone who's got a financial power of attorney who doesn't have a will. You go in for the will, you come out with those 2 bonus documents, and that is financial power of attorney. It basically, the business owner is empowering an individual or individuals, many people have backup financial power of attorneys, to basically say, if I'm unconscious, you can act as if you are me and keep my financial affairs, pay my bills, keep things rolling until I get better. And many business owners do. Okay, that is a document that affects the living. The second document, that healthcare directive or healthcare proxy or living will or healthcare power of attorney. They're called different things, but basically business owners understand this. This is the document and this is what it does. It helps your family avoid playing the game that is being played right now in a downtown Cleveland hospital. It's called Plug, Unplug. Plug, Unplug. And it's a game the whole family can play. In fact, it is the game the whole family will play, because if there is no document that helps guide those family conversations, it's that child who flies in from California, you know, the one that maybe isn't quite as connected to mom and dad, that sibling with lots of unfinished conversations. Yeah, that's the one that will refuse to go along with the other siblings and unplug. Right? And I'll tell you, that's the way it's going to go. You're going to languish in a hospital. That is also a document that affects the living.
Right.
No, that really bears itself out, especially in the COVID environment, where those folks, you know, people that personally our family's been affected by, where COVID has taken their lives, but those last couple of hours where, you know, it really became apparent that they're not going to come out of the conscious state that they're in, and all the measures to keeping them alive are just prolonging the inevitable, and suffering, quite frankly, and suffering. And so having those abilities to have those documents and have the conversations ahead of time is super important. So, you know, one of the things that really comes to bear is having the benefit of reading your book, Willing Wisdom, and really, for those people hearing it for the first time, you know, why do you think, and we'll break this down in a couple parts, but why do you think family meetings are so important? I'm going to preface this by one of the titles of your chapters, Tell Me a Story and We'll Vent the Future Together. Why do you think those family meetings are so important, Tom?
Well, I think they're important because it's a shifting of power. And to best demonstrate what I mean by that, just before the pandemic, I did a family meeting in Chicago. So I was in the family meeting, just sharing some of the ideas in Willing Wisdom. And this is a family, 17 family members, 3 generations were present in that room that day in that family meeting. Guess who was chairing the meeting that day? It was a 15-year-old girl.
Really?
I could barely tell who the person in the room who was the billionaire. The family meeting wasn't about mom and dad with hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars sitting at the head of the table, you know, with their family flanked around the side, and they're asking questions, and the person with the best answer is going to get more money. Completely the opposite. The family meeting was being approached as relinquishing power. The senior generation reaching out for conversation and ideas on how their wealth will impact the next generation. It was about preparing heirs. It was about imagining the future together by asking questions, like by asking question number 3 in Willing Wisdom, which is asking potential beneficiaries what they would do with an inheritance. It's such an obvious question, and yet no one asks it. I mean, aren't we curious to know what a grandchild would do, or a son or daughter would do with $100,000 or $1 million or 3 or 8 or 100 million? Like, wouldn't we want to just explore that together?
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know, and in our families, you know, in our family meetings, we're always spending time revisiting the past. And we're doing this for the benefit of the next generation. We're really wanting to connect the future generation with the struggles in our family as entrepreneurs to create wealth. It was not a straight line up from 1920s, from tire distribution to chemical manufacturing, plastic manufacturing, now publishing. It's been a up and down road to do what we've done. It's not smooth sailing, and we're sharing those eras of challenges. We walk the generation through the oil shock of 73 and the hyperinflation of the early 80s and interest rates at 18%. And, you know, all of that, you know, the credit crisis of 2008, 2009, and now the pandemic. It's always been that way, right? There's always been something that comes out of left field that takes the roof off operating businesses. And we tell those stories. So before we start to look forward with our family, we're always looking backwards in our family meetings and telling those stories and embedding them in our family culture. I just think that is awfully important. And of course, we're not doing this on our own. We're doing that with our advisors present. We're doing that with an agenda. We're doing that with some degree of formality. So I think, for people who don't have businesses, what I'm talking about is the business of family, which of course is a family business. You see the double entendre, you see the mixing of the words. We are actually bringing some structure and governance and rule making and agendas and minute taking so that the transition of our family wealth is done. It's a process, it's ongoing, and it's annual. And it's a day that we all look forward to. It's the day that we bring new changes in our lives to these family conversations so that there are no surprises when someone dies. There's just, we grieve. We don't lawyer up and then try to answer questions on who's going to get what. We already know. There's no nonsense. It's already determined. And the only thing we're really focused on is updating our estate plans, keeping those documents really fresh, and really revisiting those questions with our parents, how they want to age, how we can serve them.
Yeah.
That's called, we call that family glue. And those meetings can really keep families together, because oftentimes cousins will grow apart if there's not a process to keep them together. That's just entropy, right? As things grow, they tend to move further apart.
Tom, can you walk us through a typical family meeting? Who's invited? What's the structure? What does it look like when I walk in that room? So if I was a fly on the wall, what would I see?
Yeah, so the first thing you would see would be the very first family meeting would be very small, right? We don't need to complicate things. We want some early successes with the first family meeting. So it would be kind of mom and dad and the kids, no spouses present. And we might only have one agenda item, and it might be something like the selection of an executor. So that and the advisor, a trusted advisor like yourself present. And so in that family meeting, it may start like this. Hey kids, we thought we'd have a family meeting. It's something that we want to start, on an annual or quarterly basis till we get used to this. We're not getting younger. And we just want to make sure that there's no surprises, that we prepare you guys, that we've got a good estate plan and that you're aware of what it is. And so we have to update our wills. And so we need to select an executor instead of us just proclaiming who we want. Okay. Now feel the power shift here. We thought we'd invite you guys in. We've asked Dan and Kevin to maybe just give a 5-minute presentation on the duties of an executor. And then we just thought we'd have a family conversation and get your input. You see the power shift there? So the family meeting isn't, this is how it's going to be. The family meeting is, hey, we've got some ideas, but we want to get your input too, because remember, one day you're going to be taking care of us. Right? You see the reciprocity in that, and so there it is. You could spend an hour in the first family meeting just kicking around who it's going to be. Is it going to be both kids, not one kid, none of the children, a professional trustee? Whatever the outcome, the answer is always in the room. That's the best answer. People often say, what is the best answer? 2 kids, 3 kids, a tiebreaker, no kids. My quick answer is, how do I know? The answer is in the room. It resides somewhere between the relationships between mom and dad.
Do you try to plan this as something that's more casual? Is it, a meeting that's going to be fun, or do you structure it as a business meeting, for instance?
It's structured as a business meeting with an agenda and someone taking minutes. So if there's something agreed, like some kind of action item, something that's agreed to, or something that someone will undertake to do before the next meeting, we capture those in minutes. So there is a little bit of a business tone to it. But I would say that as time has gone on, our family meetings have become much more casual. We've done the governance piece. We update it, but it doesn't take very long, right? My parents have wills. I have copies of their wills. They have copies of my wills. Our kids, who are 28, 26, they have wills. When they turn 18, by the way, we buy them wills. They're very disappointed. They're hoping for cars. They get wills. It's their job to keep those wills up to date, though. But they have ours. We have theirs. We're their power attorneys. They have ours. Like, we've done the governance. Like all that fear around, ooh, who's getting what, done. Lots of conversation. Now in our family meetings, they're much more casual, and we're spending about 90% of our time really on philanthropy. We're really asking the question, and that's fun. Like seriously, you watch families work together to answer the question, where do we want to deploy some of our surplus wealth in our community? And when that becomes a family project, it's really a great exercise in connecting the next generation to your wealth. And in our family meetings, we're inviting charities into our family meetings to pitch us, much like Shark Tank, right? And our family are grilling these charities. And the reason why we're doing this is we're teaching the next generation that the kind of intellectual energy that we are investing in a charitable donation is the same kind of intellectual energy we would apply on a major spend, on a consumer purchase, or money that we would apply to an investment, right? Charity, personal consumption, investment, all three. We treat a dollar as a dollar as a dollar. We're treating all three with rigor. And that kind of family culture, I think, is what connects the next generation to wealth in a very healthy way, that gives them a real clear sense of what their duties and responsibilities are to inherited wealth. Now, compare that to the family that doesn't talk, discovers what their parents' will says at a funeral home, right? Because that's usually where the document is first revealed, because that's where the executor is revealed, because that executor has the legal authority to implement final wishes. And then everyone is like, why did mom and dad pick Mary to be the executor and exclude the three of us? Right, so here we go. We have 4 kids that are grieving, and this is how the administration of the estate starts, with the revelation that 3 kids were excluded from the executor's role.
Right.
Not good.
No, and that's really the wrong time to find out anything. So, and again, a lot of times we'll express to our business owners that these documents are your last letter to your heirs. So to expand on them slightly and say, listen, we chose Uncle Charles as to be our executive because, not just to say he's the executive. So there's a lot of things you can do, not only disclose that in family meetings, but you can always document it also too. So I know we use George Washington's will as an example, a very well written will that really talks about why he did everything he did.
Oh, I'm really glad you mentioned that. There was a time when wills were these beautifully handcrafted documents. Shakespeare's will. I mean, there are a lot of wills that are on public display, and they were thoughtful, and they were meant to connect people, to the reasoning behind why the business was left to one child and not the other,
right.
Or in Shakespeare's case, why he wanted his wife to have their bed and not someone else. It's really interesting. Compare that now to hundreds of thousands of Americans who will go to an office supply company and get a will kit for $10 or $20, go back to their home and treat it like an oil change, with leave no clue as to why they did what they did, and create all sorts of inequities that are going to set up children to lawyer up and fight over what are viewed as someone being aggrieved, right? That's how we're leaving our families. Or even worse, and even worse than that scenario, is the business owner who dies intestate without a will, as if to say, I don't give a damn. You figure it out. I don't care.
Right.
You figure it out.
You had mentioned something in your description just a few minutes ago about family governance. And I know that family governance with business owning families is very important, because it allows mom and dad to give their intent. What do we want them to happen to the next generation of this business? Can you speak a little bit about your views on family governance and family participation plans in businesses?
Yeah, so, I'm going to just go back in time and just talk about my first book for less than 30 seconds, Every Family's Business. It carries a very different idea, and that is that, gifting an operating business to your children or one child is an incredibly dangerous strategy. If family relationships matter and wealth preservation matters, it's a dangerous strategy, and the data proves it. But you know from my public lectures in both my books that I'm all about the next generation, succeeding with that business. I love it when the next generation takes over a family business. It's just that the way they should take over is a little bit different in our family over the course of 100 years. We ask the next generation to purchase those operating businesses, to risk something. Like, we're always bringing the risk to the forefront in our family culture. That is something that founders often skip over. They don't want their kids to go through those excruciating 10, 15 years that they endured when they were starting a business and struggling. But that's what makes founders, quite frankly, awesome, right? They're gritty, they're tired, they're authentic. They have been beaten down and dragged themselves back up and resurrected their business. They're incredible people. And then what do? They actually set up their children to skip over that part, and they're weak and they're disabled in a way that they're actually ill-suited to take that business forward. So here's what I suggest. I like, in the confines of a family meeting, I love it when the next generation, so mom and dad who have the voting control, take some wealth out of their operating business and transition the cash to the next generation, and asks that next generation if they want to buy the voting shares based on a third-party valuation. No discounts for family. If we discount those shares, what are we doing? We are dangling an economic carrot in front of our kids, and we're going to elicit the response that we want, right? That we want. We're going to bring our bias to that conversation. What I say is, get a third-party valuation done on the business, transition cash to the kids. It's a gift. It's tax-free. Living gifts are tax-free to the next generation. And then ask the next generation if they want to buy that business. Follow the money. If those kids do not want to risk their inheritance, that's basically what they're doing, by sending the money back to mom and dad, buying those shares. Newsflash, they don't want the business.
Yeah,
Why not
exactly.
find out? Why not find out now? And you can do that with $10,000, $100,000, or $100 million. It doesn't matter. The money is actually irrelevant. If children do not believe in their own capacity to make wealth with their family business, they don't want it. So get on with the business of finding other people to buy that business at full market value, monetize that business while you're still alive and thinking clearly, and then transition cash at the estate level.
That's a great test. That's a great test to put into play.
Yeah, I'm also a big proponent of the next generation using insurance to buy their parents' business. So the corporation can purchase insurance on mom and dad's life. And then I'm a big fan of the next generation actually reimbursing the corporation for the cost of that insurance.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, there's definitely lots of ways to do it. And that's definitely one great way to do it. Want to take this last question?
Oh, go ahead.
When we look at Willing Wisdom, you created what you call the Willing Wisdom Index, which I thought was pretty interesting. It's a fascinating resource that helps families really build that, a smart, customized estate plan. Can you share a little bit more about how you came up with that idea and what that really means, to the people that are watching this webinar, and maybe people that'll watch it a little bit later?
Yeah, I really wanted to give business owners a tool that they could, in the comfort of their own home or at their office, take 10 minutes. It's actually 8 minutes is the average. Staggering 8 minutes of their life to answer just a series of questions on a checklist, and then immediately get a report revealing the gaps in their estate plan. So that, and a series of recommendations to close those gaps, so that they could then take that report to their spouse, to their kids, have some conversations, make some major decisions about who their executor, backup executor, power of attorney, backup power of attorney, healthcare direct, make those major decisions as a family, and then, and only then, go see an estate planning attorney, right? And guess what happens when you go in? Look, attorneys take instructions. They're not like you. They're not planners. They don't look forward. They take instructions. They draft. They don't write wills. They draft wills, and then the client signs it. Then they get invoiced. It gets paid, and then the relationship ends. It's staccato. Stop. Start. Stop. And so the Willing Wisdom Index is just a tool to help business owners contemplate major estate planning decisions, to go have shorter meetings with lawyers. Shorter meetings equal, that's right, lower bills, better estate plans. And that's really what the tool does. 10 minutes to get a personalized estate planning report.
That's great. Well, I think that we had planned for roughly around 50 minutes with you this morning, and I want to make sure we leave time open for questions from those that are attending today's session with us. But I think that the questions that we've asked and your responses have really shed some great light on this subject, which I'm very happy to that we're able to do this today. So I don't know if do we have any questions from our audience today that want to ask Tom a question directly. I think now would be a great time to enter it in that conversation.
And while we're waiting for that, Tom, let's talk a little bit about executors. We'll just go over that for just a quick minute.
That's a good point.
In your opinion, should that be a family member, or should that be a trust officer or somebody, maybe a lawyer? How would you address that with most of your family businesses?
Yeah, I think when people have a good understanding of what the duty of an executor is, and I think often in family meetings when it's explained what the duties of an executor is, I mean, there's a lot of people who carry around funny ideas. When people get appointed as an executor, they feel like they're being bestowed some kind of very special status. It's an honor. It's a great moment in someone's relationship. And of course, if only one child is selected, other siblings will feel that mom and dad love that child the most. And of course, Dan, I don't know if you've ever been an executor, but if you have, I'm sure you'll be convinced that your parents loved you the least.
Absolutely.
It is not fun. It is detailed, gritty, boring, difficult.
Right.
I just can't underscore. This is not fun, sexy work. You're canceling phone bills, filing terminal tax returns, and you're also dealing with other beneficiaries. And I don't know if you know this, but there isn't an executor on the planet who has been able to do their work fast enough to satisfy the cash requirements and demands of a beneficiary. Everyone thinks that the executor is dragging their feet or absconding with some special, money, right? People just have weird ideas about what an executor can do. There's actually very little latitude for an executor. It is very detailed, prescribed responsibilities. But, and this is what the benefit of a family meeting is, right? You're setting the executor up to succeed by explaining to everyone what's in the estate plan and actually how long it's going to take to administer, even if things are super well organized. It just takes time. And again, compare that with the estate of someone where the executor doesn't even know they've been appointed an executor, right?
Yeah.
They have no idea.
Surprise.
And there's assets all over the country, vacation homes in Florida, boats licensed in some other state. They can't find the ownership documentation, like a mess. So part of these family meetings, and it's in the book, are helping, and it's in the Willing Wisdom Index, helping people understand what you want to do, how you organize your affairs, a list of your assets, where they're domiciled, all the ownership backup documentation kept in one place, shutting off social media. We haven't even talked about the digital footprint and how we need executors to have access to our passwords. Otherwise, we're going to live on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter long after. I still get a message asking me to wish a friend who died 6 years ago, asking me to wish him happy birthday.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it tells me that the family has no idea how to shut the social media off.
That digital estate asset is now something that we have to incorporate into plans and give specific instructions, because it goes up even beyond a little more of nefarious reason to make sure you can do this. Is the God's gift to everybody who's in the scam, credit theft, and identity theft business. Is they look for those memorial pages on Facebook or Instagram, and then they start targeting the decedent, because if that data still exists, they run the likelihood of being able to get in and use that identity.
Yeah.
So that becomes a major problem for a lot of families, and it can
Absolutely.
really impact it.
Absolutely, especially if there's no will, there's no executor.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so no one with the legal authority to be able to monitor accounts.
Right.
And I think in U.S. Law, it's still really forming what makes up a digital estate. Does it have value? Who's responsible? And something, just simply providing somebody a password access and making sure it's current is enough to hopefully control it. But yes, and as the market continues to go, even those folks that invest in, different types of assets that are linked to a digital footprint, they have to include that in their plans somehow. I mean, that is so important. I think that's a good point you bring up.
Yeah, especially, in a family meeting where there's minutes being taken. Of course, everyone is hearing the same. This is one of the biggest benefits of a family meeting. Everyone hears the same thing at the same time, and it's documented.
Yeah.
So those estate plans are bulletproof. Those business succession plans that are part of the estate plans are bulletproof because everyone knows what the intentions were. They're not impetuous estate plans, right? They've been discussed. So when a parent dies and some sibling says, yeah, dad wanted me to have the boat, like all the other brothers and sisters, like, hey, dude, we were all in the family meeting. We all heard the same thing. And no, you're not getting the boat, right? That's why these things are really, really valuable.
Well, as our time is rapidly growing short here, I wanted to, ask you one more question from your opinion. With you're up in Toronto, I have family members that are Canadian. They live in British Columbia. When you talk about even where assets are at, not just Florida, for example, but when you have family members with wealth in other countries, really this estate plan coordination between taxing jurisdictions really becomes super important. How has your family dealt with that? Because you guys own assets in the U.S.
Yeah, we own assets in the U.S. Obviously, we own assets in Canada and the U.K. Listen, this is, if you want to go to some office supply company and get a will kit, good luck with that. Because I guarantee you that is not going to cover those scenarios. And if you want to bury your head in the sand, you're going to be paying a ridiculous amount of tax. So for example, a Canadian estate, my brother lives in the U.S. We actually had to take him off my parents' estate as co-executor because our Canadian estate would be subject to IRS tax rules. Same thing with out of state executors. Sometimes you need the wills or a parallel will in another estate where the asset is domiciled. Look, this is not like going to Home Depot and getting some wood and building a fence on the weekend. This is not do-it-yourself land. This is get proper advice, or you are going to be paying a lot of money, not when you're dead. You're going to be paying a lot of money when you're alive. Remember, 1 in 3 Americans over the age of 65 are presenting some symptoms of cognitive impairment. Estate planning documents kick in under those scenarios, right? So this is the urgent part of my message is this is not about dying. This is about today and what might be around the corner, like being on a ventilator or some other unforeseen challenge to your health. You gotta make room for this as a priority in your life. And then here's really how I want to finish. And it's often not discussed. When I walk out of my lawyer's office, having updated my will, power of attorney, and healthcare directive, there is something that I feel that is indescribable. It is a sense that I have done something really great, something really responsible. I can't quite put my finger on it other than to explain it that way, but there is a peace and some calmness that settles over me. Like I have done something for myself and something about the people that matter most to me. And I get to enjoy my business more because I know I've done my work. I've done my work for myself and my family. It transcends money and taxes. It's a sense of leadership, a sense of leadership in my company and in my family.
I think that is a great way to a message to end our conversation today, because I think it brings peace to the situation. And that's what a lot of folks are really looking for these days, is that sense of peace. So I think this has been a great conversation, Dan.
Absolutely. Yes. Of course, those who are attending, if you'd like a copy of Tom's book, which I suggest you get, Willing Wisdom, certainly email us and we'll make sure you get a copy right away. Tom, I want to thank you for your time. Obviously, your wisdom is very much appreciated, especially even for myself as a small business owner. Even as a planner, it's always good to review these things. So it's very, very good to have you today.
Absolutely, Tom. It's been a lot of fun.
Dan, Kevin, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
All right.
All right. Take care now.
Have a great day.